Hey everybody, back again. Um, made it another day. Uh, it's funny, full disclosure, open honesty. Last night was one of the bad nights. Um, it's funny. I was just talking the other day about false hope. The last few days, I've been feeling really energetic, kind of go get 'em, and then last night it kind of hit. The disease kicked back in. And I know it was the disease because one of the things that I tell everybody, I cannot stress this enough, is I don't know if it's the cure for depression, but I know one of the things that eases it is to really get to know who you are. Um, and last night, I called it an early night. I think I was getting ready for bed by like 9:30. It was just quiet, and usually I'm good in the silence. Usually solitude is my refuge. It's where I'm at my best. I can operate the best in solitude. I don't feel lonely often, um, but last night was one of those nights where I felt lonely. So usually, um, up until a couple weeks ago, Friday night was the get together night, the gathering night. I would have a couple friends pop in, say hi, check in, talk about their week. At the time I was dating someone. That was the night they popped over to hang out. And my usual circle of friends, they all got stuff going on right now. I knew it was going to be quiet for a couple weeks because they all had their own things. And of course, the relationship is over, so the girlfriend's not coming over anymore. And like I said, usually I notice when somebody interrupts my peace more than I notice that I'm alone, if that makes sense. Um, but last night was one of those nights where I noticed I was alone. And that goes into, again, know yourself. You have to be aware, you have to try and be mindful of your habits and your triggers. Um, because it's both are settings where your brain goes on autopilot. Bad habits are hard to break. And, the other day I was talking about fake it till you make it. And I used to think that was garbage advice, but it's not, because in the concept of fake it till you make it, is what you're doing is you're building good habits. And once you have repeated those habits, again, repetition is important. You have to be disciplined. Um, it's very easy with this disease to just, get a case of the fuckets and just say, I don't care anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to deal with this. Uh, you have to, like, find that discipline to teach yourself good habits. And part of habits is triggers. Uh, a trigger is basically an automatic response. There is a certain criteria that, when met, puts you automatically on autopilot. For a lot of people, it's usually auditory. It's a certain word. And it's crazy because I've seen people get fully triggered by the use of a single word that's not even in the context that goes with the trigger. So you have to be very mindful of that. Usually our triggers are associated with something that happened that we weren't ready to deal with at the time, and it ingrains in it imprints in our brain. And then when that something even similar to that situation comes up again, our brain says, oh, I've seen this before. I know what to do. And it switches on to autopilot. And then you're making actions that you're not even consciously aware of because you let the autopilot take over. You have to be very careful of that. On the bright side is you can teach yourself opposite triggers. It's a lot trickier because, again, natural triggers are usually birthed in trauma. Something is, again, you're caught in a moment that you feel like you don't have control over it, which, by the way, is most moments for most people. There's one of life's little secrets that you just have to accept. But, you can teach yourself, and that's kind of what I've done, is like I knew I was going into that thinking, and it automatically, boom, kicked me over into analysis mode. Like, okay, I feel lonely. I feel upset. It's making me go down that stinking thinking trail. Why? And that's what you have to do. You have to train yourself that whenever the disease kicks in, you go into analysis mode, because, I've said it a million times. The big part of this is you feel like you're losing your own mind. You can't trust your own thoughts, because your brain is telling you something that you just know isn't true, but it still wants to believe it anyway. Going back to triggers, most triggers that people think of nowadays are associated with some kind of emotion. One of the first places I started in this journey was I had a lot of anger issues. So I got really into my anger, what caused it. That was one of the things, but that triggered me. Not just the trigger that triggered the anger, but once the anger was triggered, I went on autopilot. And I was not a nice person when I was on that autopilot, and I didn't want that. So I had to get rid of it. I had to retrain myself to not do that. It used to be, when I was angry, my reactiveness was to lash out. And I haven't yet gotten rid of my anger, and honestly, I don't want to, because anger does serve a purpose. Actually, it serves multiple purposes, and we'll get to one of those here in a minute. But now I've retrained myself that when I get triggered into anger, I go calm. I force myself to slow down. I force myself to hold back. I force myself to think. It's a very hard thing to do. And it's an ongoing process. There's still times when, I'll catch myself. My anger will start to show up, and I'll go, back to the old ways of wanting to be that, aggressiveness. And I just have to overcome it. But you only do that by practice, by sitting with it. That's why I like my solitude. I sit with my thoughts a lot. I analyze myself. I discover things because, again, once you understand it, you can change it. But you have to understand it. You have to be willing to take the time. One of the greatest gifts that I was given for this battle is my creativity. I am definitely an out-of-the-box thinker, and I seem pretty versatile with that. I do it with music. I do it with movies. I do it with cooking. I do it with my own, creative art projects. I do it when I'm, fixing things in general repair. It's just all the way around. I am creative. And it's that being in touch with that, you know, this is where I'm going to go a little off the deep end. I might lose some of you, but creation is when you tap into source. It is when you are most connected with source, is when you are using your creativity. So if you can tap into that, they are closely related. I tell people all the time, there is a direct correlation between your relationship with the divine, God, the universe, spirit, whatever you choose to call it, to believe in. There's a direct connection between your relationship with it and your relationship with yourself, because we are. One of my sayings that I love to come out with is, I am but a drop in the ocean, but I am also the ocean in a single drop. And that's kind of how life works. We come from source, and we always have access to it. The only way to lose that access is if you shut it off. And that's what a lot of people do. We get in that mindset. We get these habits. Grind mode. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you eat breakfast, you go to work, you come home, you take a shower, you shit, you eat dinner, you go to bed, repeat. Those are habits. And it's a hard cycle to break. And part of those habits, well, not part, a lot of those habits are necessary. They are day-to-day things, but sometimes we let those day-to-day things have more control than they should. We let them consume us, and then we don't make time for the things that counteract, most people call that escapism. To me, there's a difference, but I still haven't figured that out yet, so I'm not going to talk too much on it. I try not to, when I have these little sessions, I don't script anything, by the way. I just sit in my head for a while, whatever comes to me. Like last night, I had, that moment, and that set me up for my thoughts for today. It's funny because in a lot of things I'm a planner, but when I do these kind of things, you got to kind of fly by the seat of your pants, or at least that's how it works for me. That's how all this. I have to let my brain just go on its own. I just have this. I don't even know. I don't know what to call it. I know. I don't always know the right answer, but I always know the right question to ask. I guess is the best way that I can put it. Yeah. So there's a revelation for myself. Again, and I love these moments where I try to figure myself out, and then I have, that clarity. Like I understand more about myself. And that gets you a step closer. Because again, I am convinced, everything I've seen, all the feedback I've gotten from other people is depression is the price you pay for trying to be something you're not. Or trying to fit into a mold that wasn't made for you. Yeah, let's correct that, because it's not necessarily being something you're not, because it could be what you are, but it's not the shape that everybody wants it to take. Again, another moment of clarity. I think we'll end that, on that note today. Just some things to think about. Everybody, please just keep coming back. We're in this together. I mean, it feels like we're so alone, but we're not. Try to keep that in mind. Try to, just keep repeating in your head, even if you don't believe it. Repeat to yourself, I am not alone. I am worthy of love. I love myself. Even if you don't believe it, repeat it over and over. If it helps to do it out loud, do it out loud, but you don't have to. You can just do it in your head. And again, that is teaching yourself good habits. All right. So hopefully, we'll all come again together tomorrow and we'll have another chat. Till then, have a good one.